Thanks. So we'll get started here in a few. We have a couple more panelists that will be joining us. So we'll look at probably about a 5:40 start time. Hopefully those folks can jump on. So thanks for joining us. All right, y'all. Well, I'd say let's get rocking and rolling. Looks like it's just going to be the 5 of us, but that's okay. How are we doing tonight?
Hanging in.
Good. Love hearing that. So we should have a pretty good meeting. The agenda is was sent out and should have been posted. But tonight we're looking at a pretty straightforward agenda, and we're going to have a guest presentation. And let's see, Heather's going to be joining us. I think between 6 and 6:15 is when she's going to show up. So following our league updates. So yeah, we can call this meeting to an order and start going through. But it's good to see you on here. So for folks, looks like we got a couple panelists, folks that we haven't seen on here before. So Ava and Owen, welcome. This is the Homelessness and Poverty Work Group. We're a subcommittee of the Human Rights Commission. And our work group predominantly focuses on work plan related to advising and liaisoning for City Council through the human rights, underneath the Human Rights Commission. So we are meeting once a month on Tuesday to discuss issues impacting on housed populations, speaking a lot about policy, bias incidents, and other types of things that might be happening out there. So this evening's agenda, we have a couple key conversations. So our items will kick off with updates from Richard and Julie from League, and we'll go into a guest presentation on parking policy with Heather Merrick, who's done a lot of advocacy and research in the space. Put that in the context of the city of Eugene, talk a little bit about our collaboration and efforts to impact recent parking policy changes in ways that we might share information with council about our attitudes towards the impact of the recent policy that was passed. Then we'll go into our items for the evening, which center around statements and updates related to lethal weather, looking at our FY 22-24 work plan items for review, and then we'll have a work session to end the meeting, focusing on starting to draft statements if we approve item number 1. So that's what we got on the plate tonight. Does anyone have anything they'd like to add to that agenda before we get moving?
Yeah, there's something I want to add. I don't know if this is the time or when's the time, so I'm just going to do it at the nearest time.
If it turns into a big discussion, we can plug it into kind of our items. But if you want to announce an add item, we'll just tack it on here.
Well, a man in, I can't tell what neighborhood he's in, but a man witnessed a person drive up intentionally in a white Subaru, and I can't tell you where this is, though. Whether this is Willackenzie Road and Manchester Drive, where a homeless person was sleeping behind the bushes, and this person drove up on purpose and went around to where the homeless man was sleeping, left his wife in the car, and proceeded to urinate on the homeless man. The witness started yelling and calling him names and everything, but and he took off. But the reason I bring this up is because the police say, yes, this is bad, this is a crime, but we can't prosecute without this homeless person coming forward and pressing charges. Well, the witness hasn't seen either of these people again, and there's no telling where this homeless person is. Therefore, I think there's got to be a better way for unhoused people. We're the voice for the unhoused in this group here. And I think we should extend that responsibility to be able to maybe represent them when they can't be found to press charges in such a case. I guess I yield.
Yeah. No, thanks for bringing that to our attention, Richard. And that's a pretty common feedback. This was something that, if we remember our conversation around the incident with Dizzy Deans, is that unless the individual who's impacted comes forward, um, those resources, that prosecution isn't happening. But I think what we could talk about is ways that we document bias incidents that are reported, but aren't being able to be followed up on. So I think for this particular incident, Richard, what we should do is start with sending communications to the community, the Office of Equity and Community Engagement, with as many details on the incident as we can, to make sure that it's flagged and to see if there's any sort of follow up that their team can do from an outreach perspective. If you have photos, do they have any photos or any, identifying information on the vehicle, that the perpetrator could potentially be contacted or identified? And Richard, you're muted if you're speaking.
I just closed the article, so I need to find it again. But it was a white Subaru,
Okay.
and I don't know if he ended up getting any plates or anything like that off of it.
Okay.
But
If you forward me that article, Richard, I can do some wordsmithing, CC you on an email to the Office of Equity Community Engagement, and see what avenues of engagement that they can have there. And yeah, I think following up on this incident, it might be something that I could ask for that follow up from EPD to bring that incident into our Human Rights Commission meeting and have an intentional conversation about that. That from our EPD liaison that comes in. And that's currently Lieutenant Williams, and he'll provide a pretty detailed report on anything that we request to be at that meeting. So anything you can send my way, I think that we could have that conversation. And then if it's something that we want to create some sort of tracking or procedural change, we can reach out to our police commission liaison, and see if there's a potential for some sort of updating a procedure. I'm not sure, but I could talk to Dr. Booker about that. And currently, Dr. Booker and Scott Lemons are liaisons working with the police commission.
okay,
Like, I wonder if you could send the article to all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. We can make that available. But I think, Richard, that's probably going to be our best trail to follow on that. And we could get we can get that comprehensive report, anything that's available on the incident, from Lieutenant Williams, and then ask those types of follow-up questions, like what can we do to be tracking these if the victim isn't coming forward.
well, it's not that he's not coming forward. He's nowhere to be found. I mean, if lucky outreach person finds him, that'd be great. He is a person of Asian descent of some type. And the perpetrator is described as white, in his 50s or 60s, with white hair and a big belly. He was wearing shorts and a blue shirt, and again, driving a white Subaru. And the witness said, this is felony assault. That person did this for no other reason than that person was homeless, happened to be sleeping on the side of the trail in their neighborhood.
Yeah, and that would be bias. Like, looking at this would go into that, where unhoused status is a protecting class status for crimes. So this would be this is a report of an observation of a hate crime, which is why we could get that comprehensive report, and start asking those questions. But this would constitute as a hate crime in the city of Eugene.
Okay, well, we didn't get very far with the incident, Dizzy Deans. I don't know how far we get with these hate and bias reports. It seems that we report them and that's the end of it, pretty much.
Yeah,
And that's not a result that I'm looking forward to.
I think
Um,
what it does do is it might open up the context in supporting our recommendation for bias incidents to be considered. And if we can find follow up, like if we can get information from EPD, this is something we might be able to reach out to outreach providers in the community within our networks and see if anyone's being able to make a point of contact with that individual. Because there's a plethora of resources that are available through the DOJ to support victims of hate crimes. And if we could access those resources, it could potentially help that individual. You know, both with any mental health related needs. There's sometimes financial needs and pieces like that. But yeah, the Dizzy Deans was a very disheartening event. And I fear that this may mirror that. But I think if we can prove a pattern, try to find some identifying information, we might be able to find the individual. Have you talked to Wayne Martin at all? Wayne does a lot of street outreach.
I haven't talked to Wayne about this, but I can. Wayne is not who he used to be, but I can still talk to him about it.
He might be able to connect with some folks in the outreach space. I know that's one thing that Wayne's really actively doing. So it could be something where if we could get identifying information, he could circulate that with the outreach providers as well.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I just don't like how all of this goes because this person really has no voice and should have one. But I think that's something this body and the main HRC should think about in the future is being the voice of these people who have no voice and are never found again as far as the crime. So it's important that maybe we think about doing something like that in the future. Not to put you on the spot, Julie, if you don't want to say anything, then that's fine, but she might have something as well that just recently happened.
Yeah. Well, why don't we roll this right into some of the work that you and Julie have been doing and league updates. Just following. But yeah, Julie, I'd like to hear the status on some of your work if you're open to sharing that in this genre. But if you're still working on things, just let us know.
I love that picture, by the way.
Okay, thank you. Hey, Blake and Richard and Cynthia. It's Blake. It's good to see all of you. Yeah, that's a really good picture because my cat ran away because he's an independent little dude, and I had a tracker on it. And what he did was he went into wooded areas where he couldn't be picked up by phones or by Wi-Fi. He's very, very deceptive, but it's on his back. You can't see it, but he came back, and you could bet he's not left since he came home. So anyway, that was my 30-second blurb for put a tracker on your cat. And I would like to talk about what happened this weekend. I can someone put a timer on me really because I don't want to blather on. So
I can give you a time. Do you want to? How much time do you need, Julie? Do you want me to tell you? Or
yeah, just give me 2 minutes. I
all right,
should. Yeah.
let's
Okay.
yeah, give it.
So
I'll give you a couple minutes if it starts going. I can jump in, but I know there's a lot to it.
all
So
right.
take your time.
So thank you very much. Okay. So this weekend, I did what like a lot of people do. I went on Facebook. I saw a thing that was very disturbing. It was a receipt from a convenience store that said there should be more overdoses on Highway 99. That's exactly what it said. I immediately tried to follow up on it. I eventually went to the store, talked to the clerk. Long story short, talked to the manager, owner, I'm not sure which. If it's the owner, he has a 6-bedroom house that's worth, I'm not, millions of dollars, where I don't think they have that problem, but I did not include that in my article because you don't do that. And so I wrote a story for KEPW, because when we write a story, then it goes out on whole community news, and I think that's really important. And I'm a little bit perplexed right now. Well, perplexed is not the right word, because whenever I do stuff like this, I'm just being vulnerable and telling you, everybody in front of you, whenever I do something that I think that it will help the community, I'm so scared. Did it work? Did it not? I get really worried about that sort of thing. And so, maybe I'm being too emotional, but I'm just revealing to you, how it feels. I wanted to make sure the story got out. I thought it was really important. And so I called the gentleman again this morning, and I confirmed that the person is not going to be fired, but they're going to be um, given different information. I didn't say that in the article. I can't remember what I said, but um, um, the article's in the can, and once it's in the can, that's time for me to just relax, because I'm not, technically trained as a reporter. I just like to, when I see truth, I report truth. And when you report truth, sometimes there's parameters around that can convolute that, and I want to always make sure that I'm on the right side of truth. And so it takes me a while to produce my pieces, but I'm glad when I've got them done. And um, gosh, I'm doing a lot of self-revelation in this, so I think that I should quit and just say that I think we've got a good case. If this person ever does this again, I think we should follow up on it, but I don't think they will. I think the owner has made it clear that he won't allow this to continue in his store. However, I will just say from a personal standpoint that he was kind of complacent. Kind of live here. That's how it goes. You know. What could you say? He was young, stupid. So I didn't put that in the article. I didn't think that was helpful. What I did put in the article was I praised the clerk that noticed it and brought it to everyone's awareness, and why it spread over Facebook, and said that I would be happy to have her, in my employ anywhere, because that's the kind of person you want in your back. Okay, so that's my share. Oh, geez, I'm so used to going to different meetings, so that's my contribution. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Julie, and thanks for that update on that incident. So that article you said right now is in the can, so we'll expect to see it on Whole Community in the next couple of days to provide some information.
Yeah, absolutely. John Q is working on it right now. It actually might be live as we're talking. The only hesitancy was I just wanted to make sure that I provided to quote Fox, a fair and balanced assessment of the situation. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Julie, and thanks for doing that work and going and getting more context on it. I know it's been something that we've had discussions about. I've had discussions about with multiple people that have seen that post. So more context on that is really, really helpful, and hopefully we see some sort of resolve there. Richard, I see your hand.
Yeah, it was interesting that there was others who reposted this on Facebook, pictures of the receipt, which actually said at the bottom, Highway 99 needs more overdoses. This actually said this, and you couldn't believe the people in this community that agree with that. And it was very appalling. So I just wanted to add that to the discussion, that there are people that actually think that's a good idea, and they're tired of these MFers in their area and stealing from them and blah blah blah. So our work is far from done. I yield.
Yeah, thank you, Richard.
I'm trying to figure out how to raise my hand. I just wanted to add to Richard's comment that yes, I got a lot of negative feedback on it. That people were yeah, very negative, and I wanted to put a positive spin on it, that we had a community member that did the right thing. So yeah, thank you, and welcome, Heather. It's so good to see you.
Great to see you guys.
Yeah, welcome. So happy to have you tonight. Yeah, well, Julie, I look forward to reading that article. I appreciate the boots on the ground perspective and bringing that in, and that follow up with that business. I know that a lot of folks, especially those residing on Highway 99, were pretty shocked by it being written in print. But I think that when we talk about this bias and the discrimination for folks, both in this instance, an intersection of disability status and housing status, just the prevalence of, I think that this is one example of the prevalence of that bias that does exist. And I know that that area is impacted pretty significantly by those types of things. Like, I think that bias is happening quite a bit, actually, especially with the concentration of folks who are, experiencing homelessness and living in shelters in that area. And so I think that this is something that our group, where we're trying to support individuals who are experiencing bias, to be really prevalent. And present in that conversation. So if you're establishing connections with folks out there, Julie, maybe we can be touching base with those points of contact to make sure that there isn't common practices of discrimination amongst businesses on that track of highway over there. So Richard, I see your hand.
Yes, I didn't realize that Heather's in the house. Right, Heather, way to go. I don't know if you have any comment on either of these cases, but I'd love to hear it if you do.
Actually, Richard, and by the way, thank you. That's like the best greeting I've ever received. I joined this meeting just a few minutes ago, and I was trying to figure out what everybody's referring to. So if you have a link to like maybe your article, Julie, that you would be willing to share, I'd really like to read up on it without taking everyone's time to re-explain it all.
Sure, it's just my commentary was a man that was homeless, sleeping behind some bushes, that got intentionally urinated on by a man who got out of his white Subaru to do so. And then, of course, Julie had a convenience store with a receipt that at the bottom said Highway 99 needs more overdoses.
Hey, the last part again about Julie's report.
I'll fill in, Heather. There was a really weird thing that happened this weekend, and it has not been published. I submitted it about 2 hours ago, so it should be on Whole Community News. What happened is a white guy, according to the clerk, I thought it was a joke to say that instead of "have a nice day" or thank you for shopping with us, he would put the adage, there should be more overdoses on Highway 99, and that was very alarming to me. So I went out there and I talked with the clerk, and then after that I followed up with the owner, and the whole story is going to be on whole community news, but I thought it was really important to bring to the meeting because that kind of an attitude is very well, as you as you're hearing it, you can say is very frightening. I got the impression, unfortunately, from the owner that he was kind of complacent. Well, we live in this neighborhood, they're young guys. It's gonna happen. He didn't fire the guy. However, he did say on Facebook that he would. So I contradicted that, and I clearly indicated that that was his statement. And so we've got the factual information on whole community news when it does publish, which should be in the next couple of hours. And I honestly, I am so exhausted because this kind of work is so hard. I just want to say that it is so hard. We want to make things right for everybody, but it took me almost 3 days to write the story because I wanted to get it right because these people are being harmed. This is so important, and I wanted to take every effort to make sure that whatever I published, it was essentially 100% accurate so that nobody could come back and say that's not true. Because we have a huge problem here, we need to solve it, and I want to be impeccable. Maybe that's TMI, but yeah, there you go.
Thank you for telling me about that. I'm kind of reeling from that update. I had heard about the urination. I hadn't heard about that really dehumanizing statement of that clerk. But I just want to say, Julie, that like you're such you're such a great example of an investigative journalist, and I respect your work so much that you use your platform to like amplify the voices of people who are, really marginalized in our community and demonized, and that you like are so rigorous with your investigating and your reporting. I'm really appreciative for it, and I'll be looking for your article.
Yeah, I echo all those same sentiments, Julie. It's the work you do and the humanistic narrative that you bring to your journalistic process, and then to find platforms like this to share and make sure that other people are aware. Having Jetty present at the last meeting and bringing in information around what happened with the clearances out in Seneca, doing that boots on the ground work. It's really hard work. It's really hard work when you're out there and you're interacting with folks, especially doing an interview with someone whose business engaged in discriminatory practices. So I just want you to know you're really valued, and yeah, just want to recognize that. It sounds like it was a really hard weekend for you.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you guys. I know I'm not recognized, but I just want to thank you guys for your feedback because it was a very emotional piece for me. Because there but for the grace of God go I. It could have been me that they were talking about, and it's not a joke. It's not funny, and if it takes one person to stand up like this, I want to celebrate her. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Julie. Okay, well, thank you for the updates and leak updates, and the work that you two are doing. And as that article comes out, if anyone has any follow-up or questions, we'll reach out to you, Julie. Okay. And anything that we can do, this will be something that we talk about with the Human Rights Commission, bringing into those updates, really talking about this incident is really important at that level so that folks understand what's going on and the work that you're doing. So looking at our time, we've got just a couple more minutes. Richard and Julie, is there anything else that you'd like us to know in regards to your updates with League before we go into Heather's portion presentation?
Not really. We're up to, I think, full on our membership. So that's all else I've got to report. That's what we've been involved in. And so our next meeting is this Friday. So I'm not exactly sure what's in store for that, but we are membership full, I believe.
That's amazing. Thanks for that update. Yeah, I know a couple folks that have just joined. I'm very excited for them to be on there. Julie, any other League updates?
Oh, yes. I wasn't sure if I was able to do my hand. Yes, it's really been very encouraging because for a while we didn't have a huge amount of interest, and now that we've had more input, I think the our work has been better. So I just wanted to say that.
That's great. Well, I'm glad that y'all are at full membership, and I'm excited to see the work that you do. So if there's any sort of work plan items or areas that we can support or collaborate, just let us know. So thanks for the updates and all the work you two are doing. Okay. Well, Richard, I just saw you unmute. One last thing.
Oh, I just wanted to say thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So, okay. Well, our next item for this evening is Heather is here to speak with us a little bit about the recent parking policy changes, some context on the research and advocacy work that she's been doing, and just to really bring us into the loop. As you all know, folks that have served on this work group with Heather, she knows her stuff and does her homework. And I'm really appreciative that you're here, Heather, to share what that process has looked like for you and things that you've learned. One of the items that our work group that I'd really like for us to be able to do, and I've talked to Cynthia and Jackie about this, and we would like to put something forward to the commission to provide a statement on our basically our reservations and the discussions that we had with Councillor Leach surrounding the impact of this policy and the nonsensical nature of this policy and how much it's going to have both a direct and disparate impact on individuals who are seeking shelter within their vehicles, RVs, or alternative shelters. And that statement, I think, is really important for our commission to put forward. And we can talk a little bit more about that after Heather's presentation. So after Heather gets an opportunity to talk with us, we'll talk about those impacts and how we will reflect and communicate that information to council, and see what that follow-up looks like. So Heather, I really appreciate you being here. I know that I'm really looking forward to your presence. I miss your presence on this work group and all the wonderful things that you do. So welcome, and I'm just going to turn the mic over to you. We've co-chaired this, so I know you know how to hold the space really well. So welcome, and thanks for being here.
You know how I know how to take the space and to talk your ear off.
I love that. And you have plenty of time to do so. We've got plenty of time for you. So the floor is yours.
Okay. Are you seeing this in presentation mode or no?
Yes.
Okay, good. So
Not in presentation mode, just in
okay.
slide mode. Sorry. But we can still read it very well in slide mode if you can't figure that out.
Well, give me 10 seconds to see if I can figure it out.
Okay.
It's showing it on one of my monitors, but not the right one. And that is a Zoom problem, I think. Or not a problem with Zoom, a problem with me operating
Yeah.
Zoom.
It's hard. Digital world is hard. Perfect. Okay, we can see it now.
Great. And is anything obstructing it, like the list of participants or chat or anything?
Looks good to me.
Okay, great. Well, so I hope you'll ask me questions, if I'm not focusing on what you hoped I would. But I prepared a little discussion about vehicle residency and some of the policies in the city that are affecting folks who live in their vehicles. And you guys all know I work for the legal aid office here of Oregon Law Center, and we represent low-income folks around the state, and in particular, a lot of folks who are experiencing homelessness. And working on that, I don't know if you'd say we've had the opportunity. We've had the experience of representing several folks who have had their homes, their vehicles seized by the city. And you know, it's a nationwide issue, right? It's a housing issue, it's an economic issue, it's fueled by the climate crisis. In Lane County in particular, we saw a lot of folks moving into their vehicles after the 2020 fires, and Springfield actually had changed its ordinance to accommodate people in their vehicle or living in their RVs and vehicles more, in response to that. And it's one of the fastest growing populations among unhoused folks, and it's more likely to be women and children and elderly than the general homeless population. And I thought I would just ask you, like, why do you think people would live in their vehicles rather than, say, a tent?
I can say for many individuals, it's safety and mobility, and not being able to access shelter programs. You're on a wait list, and you have to have a place to live while you're on a wait list. I know those are three really big issues that I've talked to a lot of folks who are residing in vehicles. There's a plethora, but those are three major ones.
And Anne, what do you think?
I think it's more secure feeling. I mean, it's a physical, solid space, and it's yours, until they take it away. And I think it would give you a greater sense of security.
Yeah. And Thomas?
Yeah, pretty much what they said, in addition to a door that locks.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'm not the expert on vehicle residency, but all of those things you guys articulated are what I've heard from people as well. And is that a new hand?
No.
And yeah, it's, even though we know that there are really important reasons that people reside in their vehicles, and even though we know it's a growing population, it's a nationwide phenomenon, it's illegal to live in your vehicle in Eugene. The camping ordinance categorically prohibits it. You can't use a vehicle as a temporary place to live on any city road or parking lot. Private property is another matter, but people often don't have private property options. And so even though it's really prevalent, it's actually unlawful all the time. And you'll see that the city has integrated into its platform a handy way for people to report individuals living in their vehicles. But that's just one ordinance, and I think we're focusing a little bit more on the ones that deal with parking directly. Some others that really limit people's ability to survive in their vehicles are the ordinance that prohibits storing your vehicle on the street, that ordinance prohibits parking for more than 72 hours. To break that time chain, the length of time, you have to move at least 2 blocks away in any direction. And you have to be parked 72 hours before you can come back, or be away 72 hours before you can come back. And I think maybe that was an expanded ordinance over the last couple of years. It used to be, it used to be a smaller distance that you could move, like you can move across the street. That's not the case anymore. And then and that's a totally complaint-driven system. So I won't ask everyone, like, if you've ever parked 72 hours, I think any of us could probably think at least of people we know who park in front of their homes or other places for more than 72 hours. City Council was very explicit that they weren't trying to prevent everybody from doing this, just people who were reported, which is interesting. It's also, vehicles can be impounded if their registration or plates aren't current. And then another is Eugene Code 5.225, which prohibits it prohibits a bunch of things, and a lot of things that we probably wouldn't find that controversial, like creating hazards and blocking driveways and things like that. But a couple of provisions that seem to affect our clients quite a bit are, I'll start with the second one. It's the provision that prohibits parking in a tow-away zone. A couple of years ago, the city really expanded the authority of, I don't know the exact title, but the parking director to designate places as tow-away zones. And so you'll see around town, a lot of signs now that create tow-away zones where there didn't used to be, where RVs were parking. So in commercial areas like in West Eugene, this is kind of close to my house, you'll see that it's prohibited only at nighttime to park. And you'll see that, like at Washington Jefferson Park, between 1 a.m. and 6 a.m. So you'll see a lot of signs around town like that, that just like piece by piece made places prohibited to park during the night. And then subsection 3E here prohibits, if you're in an RV, parking in front of a place of residence or anywhere that has sleeping accommodations during nighttime hours. So it's legal to park there during the day. It's not considered a hazard or anything like that. It's just that they don't want you to park there during the time that you could be sleeping. And so that was already an offense previously. But what the city council did recently was that they made it an offense that a person's RV could be impounded for. And so my research had shown that only a handful of people had tickets for that over the last couple of years. I can't remember if it was 4 or 8, but it was a really small number. So they weren't citing people under it because I think these other provisions made it easier to impound. You couldn't impound under that before, but now you can. And so if somebody is caught doing that 3 times in 90 days, that can lead to impoundment. And, I think if you listen to the city council meetings, like they talked about it, like repeat offenders, people who repeatedly violate this law. I think we know that these are just people who have, it isn't that they've repeated anything, it's that they've continued to be in a state of homelessness, living in their vehicle, and that underlying issue has gone unresolved. And I feel like this kind of links to the prior discussion about, public attitudes and bias. I haven't really delved into this data. I only just got this, but this is a reflection of complaints to the city for people camping and also the data I got was really difficult to understand. But you'll see that over like this less than a year and a half, there was like more than 11,000 complaints about people having their vehicle parked more than 72 hours. And then, other parking problems. Tent camping was pretty low in comparison. Complaints where there was no parking violation at all. People are just being reported. So I guess this is just to say that when we're thinking about this at the policy level, like, I think recognizing that there's just tremendous public support for greater enforcement. And that's something that our policymakers, that's a reality that they're dealing with. Even though it's prohibited in a variety of ways to reside in your vehicle on the streets, there isn't really anywhere else to go. So, if you know someone that has property, maybe you could persuade them to let you stay there. But this was just a snapshot from a couple months ago. I didn't update this, but this tends to be kind of the same thing every time I update my numbers, that, we have thousands of people who are unhoused in Eugene. They're overwhelmingly lacking shelter. And the parking spaces, the designated ones that the city has created, are almost always at capacity and have waiting lists. And my clients tend to report that when they've tried to access these, that they're turned away due to the waiting list. So what happens when people have nowhere to go and it's illegal to survive in your vehicle? There are a ton of cases that the city has under these ordinances, and these are just a few that I had looked at. But the one for storage on the street, in this period that was just under 2 years, there were almost 1,000 cases filed, $43,000 in fines, and almost all those fines go unpaid. Why do you think the fines go unpaid?
Nobody has the money.
People can't afford to pay them.
They're not dealing with Jeff Bezos. They're dealing with Eugenians.
Yes. Yes. I mean, if it was Jeff Bezos, like, this could be a really great money-making deal here. But as it is, you'll see, like, for camping, 99%, and this was just a snapshot in time, like, from the municipal court. And so, maybe more of these fines are in collections now than before, or maybe some of them have had some payments, but this is just a random snapshot. When the debts go to collections, it affects people's credit, which comes up on their tenant screenings when they're trying to get an apartment, or when they're trying to get credit for something else that might, elevate their situation. Of course, that's if they're paying on those debts, that's less money for getting into an apartment. And some people have a lot of tickets, one after another, like for camping. And even though, like, camping is usually cited as a violation, it can be a misdemeanor, but even though it's usually a violation, when you have a long list of violations, that doesn't look great either, especially in a very competitive rental market where you're, like, trying to get an apartment and there are a lot of other people vying for it who might not have a really extensive record. And also some of these offenses have the possibility of jail time, and I'll talk about that now. So I'm just going to go through this really quickly. These are some of the potential fines for the different offenses, and I'll just highlight the ones where you can be impounded or go to jail. So for storage on the street, you can get impounded. You can get impounded for not having updated tags or license plate. For camping, if you've been deemed to have willfully camped, then you can go to jail. And if you do it in your vehicle can get impounded. I still kind of, like, marvel at this concept of willful camping, that, like, anything about this is willful, but there you go. That's the title of the offense. And that just means that you got a notice, or like a written notice or a ticket in the last 30 days anywhere in the city telling you to stop camping, and that you were unable to stop camping, then it becomes willful. Oh, tow-away zone is also impoundable. I didn't get that in there. As we just talked about, parking in front of a residence in the night in your RV is impoundable if you're a repeat offender and you do it 3 times in 90 days. And also, the offense where people have their stuff out in the street other than a vehicle, like a trailer or a tent, if they do it, kind of in the part of the street where people tend to park, that's also something that can lead to jail if they do it. They continue to do it after they've had notice. This is a really big problem. So, the city is impounding thousands of vehicles every year. And in this 2-year period, almost half of them were for storage on the street, being parked more than 72 hours. A third of them for being in the tow-away zone. And if you look at the city's contracts with the impoundment companies or the tow companies, it's pretty expensive. So if you take that number of people whose vehicles were towed for storage on the street, and you multiply it by how much the city pays the towing companies per tow and per day of storage, even a really conservative estimate would be that the city spent about $200,000 for those 700 tows. So, when we're thinking about solutions to homelessness and whether we have the money for it, let's remember that not solving homelessness also is very expensive. And this isn't even considering like parking services officers, the court operations, because it's municipal court handling this. And then they have a loan servicer who handles it when it goes to collections. And research shows that, these debts, when they go to collections, like they're not really collectible. Like the city's not making any money off this. These people are not Bezos. But on the flip side, it's very harmful. So, these debts accrue. And when people's, well, I guess I'm talking separately here about like the impoundment itself. So, we already talked about the fines and those debts, but when a vehicle is impounded, it's the individual's responsibility to pay the towing fee and any storage fees that accrued. Every day that goes by, there's storage fees. If the vehicle is worth under $500, the towing company can keep it after 15 days. If it's worth more than $500, then the towing company needs to wait a month. But once that time has passed, they can foreclose on their lien, meaning that they own it and everything inside it. So, it frequently people are unable to get their vehicles out of impoundment. One, because they can't pay the fees and they just snowball day after day. But 2, because people often don't have the documents that the towing companies require them to show to get it out of impound. And these aren't documents that are required under statute necessarily, but the towing companies will often require people to show proof of ownership. People like sell and trade and give old RVs in like kind of an informal system often, or they get it from a relative. I had a client whose relative passed away, and so it was still in the relative's name. And then the towing company wanted like proof that it had been left to her in the estate or whatever. And like, it's like, how is she gonna get these documents while like the time is ticking, for the towing company to foreclose on its lien? It's just like this crazy bureaucratic nightmare. And, some people don't have IDs. Some people don't have registration or insurance. So they, which I'm not saying is ideal and I'm not like condoning it, but at the same time, people often don't have money and, it's a question about whether they should lose their home just because they haven't been able to come up with the money for those things. And so there are a lot of barriers and a lot of people lose their vehicles or RVs. And I've had a lot of clients in that situation. And when that happens, they lose their shelter, they lose their safety. I had a female client who her RV was taken. It had all her clothing, it had her like pet food. She like ended up just in a tent again and with like very little clothing in winter. And as a woman, that's like or anybody. But I think, a lot of women in particular would feel very vulnerable. And the towing companies, even though they're required to let people get stuff out of their RVs, under a lot of circumstances, they routinely deny people access. So people will often lose all their belongings, including identification or medications. I've had 3 clients whose vehicles have been towed with their pets in them. One of them lost their pet forever. This is very destabilizing. Every time people lose their stuff to sweeps, they have to start over. And I had a client who was going to a job interview the day that their RV was towed, and so they didn't go to it. And so, it's just very like disruptive, and traumatic. And so, we suggest that we should be handling homelessness as a housing problem, and an economic problem, not a parking problem. Recognizing people have to be somewhere, and that we're not going to solve homelessness through parking enforcement. And just as an empirical matter, like there are solutions that are much more effective. As I discussed, enforcement is very expensive and harmful, but housing has been shown to help people who need housing. And, at a minimum, giving people places to go could really mitigate this need to constantly be chasing people around. Like I had a client call it the game of cat and mouse, where like they're being like given a notice and then they move to another place and then they're given a notice, and they're constantly on the move. Also, just sometimes asking people what they need can, you might be able to help address the problem. So, like I said, or like a third of the tows, no, was it a third? A chunk of the tows, no, I didn't have it in that slide, but there are a lot of tows for people not having registration for their vehicle. And most people who don't have registration, it's because they haven't been able to get the documents and they don't have money for it. What if we assisted them in getting that and making their vehicle legal? I talked to someone whose vehicle was towed when they needed a jump, but the towing company showed up and she didn't have money to pay for a jump, so they just went ahead and towed it as had been requested by the person who complained about her car. And so it's just so silly because she would have moved it if it had been jumped. And as a result, she lost her vehicle. And there's a lot of discussion about trash and waste disposal, and we are a very progressed society where we have high-tech solutions for those things like waste disposal. And so some of those needs could be addressed. And something else we've talked about at Legal Aid is just, targeting conduct and not people. Like I said, this isn't a parking problem. This is a homelessness problem. And it seems a little disingenuous to talk about it like it's just about whether people were parked properly or not. And a lot of the offenses that they talk about are ones that already have, like there are already things on the books that could address it. So, disaggregating homelessness from like people yelling and, using drugs or acting violent, all like the tendency is to conflate those things with homelessness. But we know that they're separate, that there's nothing about homelessness that means people are engaging in those acts. And those acts, there are already crimes that allow police to address them without targeting people for living in their vehicles. In other words, by like making it an offense to park in front of a house at night is a really indirect and imprecise way of dealing with other problems. All that says about the person is that they were parked in front of a place at night and they needed to sleep in their vehicle because it was night. Um, and along those lines too, the fact that it's a complaint-driven system really raises the question about whether it's actually the conduct that's the problem, or it's just that the person is bothering other people in the community, that housed people don't like them there. Because, for example, if parking for 72 hours is really a big public safety problem, well, wouldn't the city want to be targeting all people who are parked for 72 hours? No, they just do it through the system where it's just targeting certain people who are unpopular in the community. And so I will just close by saying this is an issue that we're tracking really closely at Legal Aid. I really want to talk to people who are encountering these issues, any of them. People who are living in their vehicles, people who were previously living in their vehicles but lost their vehicles. And so please share my contact information freely. And that's all I have. So I'll stop sharing my screen and Richard, you take it next.
Well, thank you. That was really impressive and a great rundown of what's going on. I'm sure you know that you can't park in front of a mailbox either. Otherwise, that's a problem. So, and I'm sure that nobody's going into the South Hills to check on Grandma and Grandpa's spanking brand new RV that they are parking for more than 72 hours to visit their family there. So, yeah, like you say, this is very targeted. It's interesting to note that, and I've said this before, that even the tow truck companies are a little mystified by all of this, to say the least. In that one tow truck company owner said, I don't understand what the city is doing. We move them 2 blocks and then we come back a couple of days later and we move them back 2 blocks. And I don't know what we're doing. And that was the sentiment of one business owner in the city. There was a lot to cover there, so I can't remember everything I was going to say, but I will say this. There is the new provider dashboard, otherwise known as the Shelter Finder. It's out there. When it was under development, one of the advocates for having it out there, among others, were the Eugene police. Oh, yes, we want that. That would help us greatly. The Shelter Finder, of course, is to be used when you're going to relocate somebody, quote unquote, and you're going to find out where they can go. Well, in this instance, these instances that you have illustrated, as well as the encampment on the Seneca Railroad tracks, the police have not at all attempted even to use the Shelter Finder, which is in direct violation of I don't know how many jurisdictional laws from the Ninth Circuit Court, including Martin versus Boise and Van versus Los Angeles, and I could go on. Also, Councilor Lindsay Leach proposed, instead of doxing these people like you're describing, is that if somebody only needed a jump, then maybe we could have some kind of intervention team go out there that knows how to repair an RV and do something about it, or have other types of people available to help repair an RV. Most of these RVs do not function by the turn of a key. And that's as much as I can remember. I'm going to yield at that.
I'm not sure who is next in order, so
It was Anne.
okay. I'll let y'all just popcorn. Sounds good.
Heather, what are the years these data are based on?
Most of the data is based on it was almost a complete 2-year period of 2022 and 2023, except it's just like to the end of November in 2023 because of when I requested it. With the exception of that chart where I showed you the complaints that people have made, that was a different request I made. That was from January of 2023 through like basically this last month.
And will we be able to have a copy of the presentation?
Absolutely.
Yeah, because it's had a lot of information and it's very, very useful.
Are you finished, Anne?
Yeah, that was it.
All right. Heather, thank you so much. The presentation was excellent and the research is excellent. And part of what I was going to ask you, Anne already asked you, which is whether we could have and use your data and cite it, of course. So is that okay if we, in our letter to the commission and to the council, that we cite your research?
Absolutely. And it was all based on public records. So, even though I like kind of synthesized it, I don't own that information. And also, I've pointed out some of this information to city councilors before, so they might know, like I think Councilor Leach, for example, would know what you're talking about.
Thank you.
Julie?
Yes, thank you for recognizing me, Chair. Heather, thank you so much. We've been in so many meetings, so many times throughout the years, and your work has been just you've never given up, and you've been like a guiding light for me, as to why I should not give up. And so I just wanted to give you props for that. But more importantly, can you give me a soundbite that I can put out there and I can say, this is how it is, people. Yes, I work for the radio and that sort of thing. I was kind of roped into it because I was willing, but I want people to know how important it is. But you have been presenting this information for some time, and people are still not getting the message. It's not that your information isn't accurate or relevant or super important. It's just not, it's not resounding, and I don't know how to resolve that gap. You may not even have an answer for me. I just wanted to put that out there because it's that important.
Thank you, Julie. And first, just likewise, like I find you very very like inspiring, and I always feel so like energized when I talk to you and everyone here. I mean, I feel like this is like the riddle. It's like we know this information, and how do we like get the public to understand? I think that, I could like write a more coherent soundbite, but maybe like it seems to me like just understanding that this is a housing issue, and that people have nowhere to go, that and that using parking enforcement is harmful and it's ineffective and very expensive. But I could try to write something that was more coherent.
No, thank you. I mean, I think the solution is we just have to keep on, keep doing what we're doing. And, the proof is in the pudding. I mean, you brought forth the statistics, and I think one of the things that I would like to rely on is the cost effectiveness. If we can show people, if we spend money here, we can save money here, and overall we win. To me, that's like the obvious solution, but to me, what's obvious is maybe not so obvious to others.
If you email me, Julie, like I can also like share, like point to a study or two. I actually did this for Counselor Leach like a year ago, maybe. I wrote her like a whole like bibliography of studies that show that it's like more expensive to use police and the criminal justice system for homelessness than just giving people freaking housing. And of course she already knew this, but she just wanted like, something to like point to. And
Yes,
yeah.
yeah. If you could do that, and I think that Richard might remember that we brought some anecdotal evidence into our league meeting that there was a particular food company that had containers of food that was expired outside of their stores, and they spent more money on keeping that food away from the people than was really merited when they figured out the cost effectiveness of it, and the fact that much of the food was salvageable. Yeah, and I think that things like that are concrete examples can really sway public opinion. And okay, I'm sorry, Richard, your hand's up.
It is. Thank you for recognizing me, Julie and Heather. Yeah, I think this is all, as you say in your report here, all complaint driven. And these complaints are being done by taxpayers for the most part, I'm sure. And if they knew that it cost $200,000 just to tow people from one spot to another, maybe they don't want that. And I think that information needs to start getting out there, because this all seems very interesting that it's all complaint driven when there should be other mechanisms for this. But what happens out there is different, a lot different than even what's in your documents here. I know of people that have had their vehicles towed just because they look like they're camping in it, because there's stuff in the vehicle. Obviously, you're camping, so we're taking your vehicle. And I've seen that before. So, what was it? Bernice Pogue had a wire from the neighbor, plug-in from the neighbor to plug her RV while she packed it up and was trying to leave with her kids inside at night. And Springfield police on Legalized Survival on the Air said, well, you're camping, so you can't do that. You need to leave and go to Eugene. Go to Eugene. They don't care. Very interesting. So I think if we got the message out that this is costing people a lot of money that are taxpayers that could be used for other things, maybe that could make a difference. And this is in collaboration with Lori Haber's criminalization report, which needs to be updated. So I yield at that.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. So I think, Heather, as we're looking at this, the report that you have here could really support a couple areas. I think, I mean, and echoing a lot of the same sentiments. It's the circular conversation we continue to have with policymakers that this data is really clear. The dialogue that is explicitly targeting individuals residing in their vehicles or camping or whatever modality of living that they're having is constantly under question and under persecution. And I think what our work group, I think one of the things that we can do as a group is to synthesize a statement um, to continue to have this conversation and to express our general disdain for decisions being made at a policy level. One of the questions I think I have for you, going beyond us just making a statement, is do you think there are any actionable policy recommendations that our work group could produce um, to highlight some of the trends in this research, or any specific ordinances or areas of code that we could target to propose amendments or recommendations, knowing that this is a challenge for council to approve, and they've just passed parking policy that is counter to a lot of the recommendations that you have in this report. But I'm wondering if there's any specific areas that you could see being making substantial impact to support the motion that Councillor Leach put forward, or some of the spirit of this conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Blake. I think that, even though like the focus will always be on more immediate ways to deal with, the signs of poverty on the street, which the community finds intolerable. Even though they're always going to want like really expedient, immediate approaches. I think any proposal should always acknowledge that the solution is housing and that it's a housing problem. Even though, they're going to be more interested in things that can like be like put into practice immediately. But, so much of these conversations focus on like bad behavior and bad conduct, even though what the laws are actually targeting is just like people existing. And so I think that that's like really, it's humanizing, and it's also correct to focus on housing. But then, but in terms of like more short-term policies, when Councillor Leach was trying to put the brakes on that new proposal, I had hoped that there might be more conversations with folks doing outreach and like and people with lived experience, because I think they know better what is good for them than I do. But some things that like just from what I've seen, I've thought would be more constructive. Of course, giving people more places to go. We know that when the city has given people places to go, that people will utilize them. The safe sleep sites haven't been viable for everybody, but they continue to be at capacity so much of the time. Or when there is space, it'll be like one spot. It's like people want a place to go. And then I also really liked Leach's proposal to have more like allocate some resources to helping addressing the problems. Like, so, if an RV is broken down, like Richard was saying, a lot of these are not very operable. Like, they can't move in 72 hours because they can't move. Helping people address that. And at least giving people like a fair chance to comply, because right now people don't have a meaningful chance to comply, even if they get notice, because they don't have the tools. And then also another thing, I think greater guidance and oversight of the towing companies. And I don't mean to smear whoever you were talking to, Richard, like, and I know there are several towing companies, so I don't mean to like defame anybody, but I will say that I've talked to many people who have, basically like been extorted, like, because they're in a vulnerable position. And the only way they could really do anything is if they took them to court. Well, who's going to sue the towing company when they're like unhoused and just trying to like get by? And so I think that there's not a lot of oversight, and the towing companies who get to decide whether to let people access the vehicles or to get them back at all have a vested interest in denying people access because they get to keep it in the end. And so, there's a conflict of interest that I think needs greater transparency. And I also think the Eugene Municipal Court, their processes are pretty ad hoc, and people get denied even an opportunity to have a hearing all the time. And so I think having a more rigorous process there could also help. And, so that's just stuff from the perspective of a lawyer that I think really could use some reforms.
Yeah, thanks for that. There's so many things that I want to say and have questions I have, but I really appreciate those recommendations. And I think as we bridge into this conversation, really thinking about what types of recommendations can we make, or things could we discuss, from a human rights perspective, what's really emphasized to me is that personal belongings piece. I think it's 17, and that housing piece, which is Article 25, right? Indexing that these are clear human rights issues that are being basically propagated by the policy, with pretty minimal oversight. And the personal belongings, also doubling as a shelter, I think is something that warrants a lot of oversight. So I really appreciated that component of that recommendation, Heather, that's looking at what is this relationship of the contractor with the impacted individual, and where are the disparities for that impacted individual to try to access personal belongings. Where do those really play out? I can speak from a personal perspective where I've had a vehicle towed by the city of Eugene. And, you know, I was thinking a lot of through the lens of how does one access this vehicle. To when my vehicle was towed, which it was for a standard parking violation. um, I had no one contact me, so I didn't know where my vehicle was. I actually spent half a day thinking that it was stolen. Was then updated after calling dispatch, which meant that I had to have a phone to even identify where my vehicle may be. Then I had to go through the puzzle of figuring out how I was supposed to get to the other side of town. I was in the university area, and the vehicle had been towed all the way to Barger, so the Beltline on Highway 99. So a very significant distance from where I was. And I had to pick up the vehicle, or face more financial penalty for daily lot fees. And that lot was only available to a certain hour on Saturday. It was unavailable for pickup on Sunday. And when I got there, I had to pay in cash. And there's just a lot of, I mean, boom, 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 boom. I had to have a cell phone. I had to have transportation. And then I had to be able to go to a bank and withdraw money, which meant I had to have a bank account to go out and to pick up a vehicle without having a vehicle to get to the place to pick up the vehicle. And so that entire process showed me, as you know, someone who I'm a renter, the challenges of just confronting this as a renter who has income, who had a cell phone, and was lucky enough to have, you know, a person that was willing to give me a ride. Um, but gosh, navigating that unhoused and then also trying to triage whether I'm going to have a place to live and be sheltered this evening, and the anxiety surrounding that. I feel like we have an impossible puzzle for someone who is unhoused and marginalized to navigate. And I, as this, you know, a more stable individual who had employment, who has housing, had a horrible day and a horrible time navigating the institutional barriers. Oh, I really just agree with this conversation about access and oversight, and if this actually makes sense. So I wanted to share that personal narrative there, Heather, because it's something I think about all the time. And I reflect on that at my personal experience navigating the system, and just think about the exorbitant challenges that would be exacerbated if that vehicle was the vehicle I was residing in, trying to navigate that process. So yeah, thank you for that context. I just wanted to share that note and really put that in perspective, you know, from a lens of my personal experience. So Richard, Cynthia, Ann, your hands went up, so I'll let you kind of follow that piece.
I thank you for that, and I thank you for that narrative there. That's very insightful, and how this all works. The people I know that had their vehicle towed were not allowed access to the vehicle to get anything. So I don't know how that works, but most of the time that's a big no. I think it's time that these things like this report here you have stop being just in-house. It's like going to church and preaching to the choir. Of course, we know this. We know. We have known. It's time that everybody else knew. It's time that you give this type of report to the Eugene Weekly, to the Oregon Emerald, to KLCC, and KPW, and others, so we can get the word out that, yes, you idiots, you're paying $200,000 to do this kind of stupid stuff to people that are going to get so traumatized that it's going to catch up with society. Nobody is getting this. Nobody is watching what's happening. I'm a reporter. I report the news. I report the most horrible things that you can imagine, like a kid being pushed by a homeless person into the New York subway train tracks, and luckily was rescued by somebody else as quickly as he fell in. But there was a guy just recently in Los Angeles that was throwing rocks off the 110 freeway just to see how much trouble he could cause. He was homeless. And the culmination of all of this, the ultimate trauma of all you're dealing with day after day after day, you have no human contact whatsoever except for law enforcement, then this is what happens. This is now about a year old, but a homeless person in Los Angeles walked up to a random young lady, a teenage girl, and stabbed her in the chest with a huge pair of yard scissors. I don't know how else to describe them. She's still in the hospital, as far as I know, in critical condition, or she's passed away. And this is what constant trauma does to you until you're so dehumanized, you don't know what you're doing anymore. Is this the problem we want? I think the word needs to get out to the general public that this is what you're doing to the homeless. This is what it's costing you, and it's time to stop it. I yield.
Cynthia?
Heather, did you want to say anything after Richard's comments? Or shall I jump in?
Um, I I do have thoughts, but I was also hoping others would chime in too. I've talked a lot.
Okay. Well, I'm just going to reiterate or support what's already been said. I liked the three ideas that you gave us very much, even though it was off the cuff. They were very well presented and thought out. And I just wanted to thank you for being able to articulate things in this way. And I really support what Richard said about our perhaps helping you get publicity for these solutions, because the conversation that happens usually in Eugene is not about solutions and not about the real situation. We hear mostly prejudice being repeated. And Blake, I also wanted to thank you for that report of your terrible day, because that testimony really highlights what a person without resources would be going through. And by contrast, it allows people to see the difficulty and to have more empathy for that. And the last thing I wanted to say is I often think about this, and Blake said it. I think it's fine to present economic arguments because people do care about money. But from the perspective of our mission, we need to also present the human rights reality, that housing is a right, and that having your property stolen from you or taken away without due process is a violation of rights. And I would like for us to couch everything not only in economic terms, but in human rights terms. So thank you. That's what I wanted to say in response.
And Julie, and then Heather, at any point, if there's any jump in, you feel free. We're just popcorning. So, Anne, the floor is yours.
Yeah. If I've been having this strange brainstorming going on over here. You know, a lot of us are doing what we can to help people with food and also, you know, medical care. And it occurred to me that, in fact, mechanical help could also be extremely useful. I mean, if you're in a situation where you've been told to move a vehicle and you can't get the vehicle to start, in an ideal world, there'd be a number you could call where somebody who is a mechanic would come out and help you start your vehicle so you could go. And I mean, I know it sounds all, how can I say, a little creative at the moment, but it's something I'd like to see if I could get going. I know that there are some folks who have been refurbishing RVs so that people can use them and so on. So maybe some of those folks would be interested in starting a group that could help on an emergency level. That's all.
Thanks. And Julie?
Yeah, thank you for recognizing me. I just wanted to say thank you to everybody that took the time to come out tonight and, you know, put their, you know, feelers together and see what we can come up with. I think that publicity is definitely going to be a big thing, because I'm a big believer then if you show them the money, if you say, you know, if you spend $5 here, but you save $500 here, that to me that readily speaks to me, and I think it does to taxpayers too. And I think that we can come up with more of those types of things. But I'm not like a meme or a person that makes those types of statements. I don't have that kind of gift of gab, but I just wanted to acknowledge I really do appreciate that there's so many people that care about our community, and I would just encourage everyone that's here. I know that we all get burnout, and I hope that you all continue to engage, and despite our setbacks, I think that we've all seen um I've seen I think we've all seen advances, and I hope that can carry us through, because I appreciate each and every one of you. If you guys weren't coming to these meetings, I absolutely would not be because sometimes I don't know what to do, but then I come here and I'm inspired, and there's that fire that's under me gets lit a little bit hotter, and so I appreciate that creativity that flows between us. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Julie. So, yeah, and I think that is the spirit of this group, right? Is being able to come together and to talk about issues like this and think about ways that um, we can decompress and collaborate and try to do to make meaningful contributions to to this ongoing crisis, and policies like this, which only exacerbate the condition of individuals who are experiencing homelessness. It's a really big challenge, and I appreciate you indicating that burnout, Julie, because I think it's really real and it can be really hard to grapple with the reality that often, at least the direction of current policy, is that we see it going in a manner that is not only making it more challenging to exist in the city of Eugene if you're experiencing homelessness, but in a manner that's also disregarding some of the basic tenets of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that we're supposed to be advising on. And that can be a really challenging reality to grapple with. And I hope that we can get the ears of political leaders to recognize some of the implications of the decisions they're making recently. Yeah, just wanted to share that piece. And Heather, I know that we asked you to be here about a half hour, and I knew that I'd rope you into at least an hour of conversation because we love having you here. And I think I'd like to just kind of provide some space for you to be able to share thoughts and follow-ups, and yeah, kind of just touch base as we look at the end of our meeting and some of our closing pieces for today's meeting.
Thank you, Blake. I just had a couple of short comments that well, one, I think I hope it's an ongoing conversation. I wanted to say that I appreciated your anecdote. I think it's a really good illustration of just like how Kafkaesque the whole thing is, and just the incredible barriers. And I think the point you made, Richard, about appealing to the broader public is a really good one. And then I also I wanted to acknowledge Owen in the chat, like asking about eminent domain. And I wanted to say that that is outside of my expertise, but I understand the governments have, you know, broad discretion to do that for public uses. And, if they compensate the property owners, and, I'm probably a little radical, but like, I think that would be really awesome if the city did that. Whether that would be a very politically popular idea, I don't know, but we know there are a lot of vacant properties and buildings that are not being fully utilized right now. And then, the comment about rights, I think it's really good to remember the basic human rights implicated here. And some that I would add too are the ones that prohibit inhumane and degrading treatment. I didn't look up the specific language, but the international Declaration of Human Rights, I think, talks about that. And so, just criminalizing people for like, surviving and nothing more than living in their vehicle seems pretty degrading, and taking their property too. And then the final thing I was going to say was, I want this to be an ongoing conversation. And I think this is something we have to tackle from multiple angles, the policy, public education, and also, please do spread the word that this is something that legal aid is monitoring, and that, if people have their vehicles impounded, like sometimes we provide support to people to help them navigate the process. It's a pretty speedy process. There's not a lot of time when it happens, but also we're trying to like kind of monitor the city's enforcement, and see if there are things we can do to help stop the harm. So, please do refer us and refer people to us, and tell your community partners to refer people as well.
Yeah, thank you, Heather. I appreciate that. And I appreciate knowing that you're a resource for whenever folks are being impacted by this. And it is such an expedient timeline that it can be really challenging to do all that administrative coordination and meet those goals. So the earlier we can intervene and do that outreach, the better. So I really appreciate that. And Richard, I see your hand, and then I think we'll talk about next steps for this conversation and directions that we can take this.
Well, thank you. Well, it's not that often that we have Heather in the house, so I'm going to pose a couple here. One, how could we hold law enforcement accountable for not using the shelter finder? When you're relocating people, it's important to do it according to the law, especially U.S. District Court jurisdictional law. So how do we do that? And number two, what was it? Oh, now it escapes me. Oh no, right at the end. Oh God. If I remember, I'll raise my hand again. If I got it, it probably will come to me, but it escapes me right now. Sorry about that.
No problem, Richard. Julie, and then we'll talk next steps.
Yes, I recognizing me, Chair. I actually have to go check my laundry right now before somebody takes it. So thank you for everybody for coming tonight. I'll see you next month. Thank you, Heather, tonight. As always, it's really good to hear from you, and I hope I can take your information out to the public. I will definitely be relying on it, and yeah, I do have to go. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Richard, is that a new hand or is that a previous?
Yeah, no, that's a new hand. Yes, I remembered. And I'd also like to get Heather's thoughts besides on the shelter finder. I'd also like to get her thoughts as quick as possible, if possible, on Johnson versus Grants Pass. I yield.
I'll start with the second one, because that's something that I think might be a little easier. So you guys know that probably that the Supreme Court heard argument on it. So, and that's an Oregon Law Center case that our legal director at Johnson worked on. The Supreme Court heard the argument in April, and they almost always issue all their opinions in June, by the end of June, I mean, because they like to have a nice summer vacation where they pretend like they didn't eviscerate rights. And so anyway, that we don't know exactly how they'll rule. It's possible that they could reverse Martin v. Boise. That issue's before them. It's also possible that they could just decide not to decide on the case, because it was just a really weird procedural case, and they really shouldn't have taken it in the first place. And so there was a good argument that they shouldn't have. It's possible that, that we were surprised that a couple of conservative justices didn't seem as bad on it as we thought they would be. So, there's always a chance it could go well too. So, but that issue is before them, and we're going to hear in the coming weeks, and we'll be able to regroup after. But, we still have a law in Oregon, a statute that codified Martin v. Boise, that was passed in 2021. And so in Oregon, we will still have a way to try to enforce that, even if the Supreme Court does the wrong thing. That doesn't help everyone else around the country, but that's one silver lining, I think.
Thank you, Heather. Yeah, that's, I feel like I could invite you back for an entire another conversation about Martin v. Boise and the implications, and maybe after June, when we get that ruling and we hear what happens, that would actually be really wonderful to maybe have you present to share perspective and implications on that, and if there's anything that we should be recommending at a city level, depending on the outcome of that. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, I appreciate that. Well, okay, y'all. Let's talk next steps. Parking policy piece. So I think one of the biggest things that we're looking at is probably producing a statement regarding the recently approved Chapter 5 amendments, and expressing basically echoing the sentiments shared this evening. I think one of the components that I'd really like to highlight is that our commission and our work group engaged in the process of advising. We made explicit recommendations to City Council through our council liaison. Councilor Leach not only engaged with this work group, but engaged with the Human Rights Commission. And just as Heather shared, we did not see any true changes to the policy or substantive updates to the policy to address those concerns whenever that policy recommendation went to work session. So I think really highlighting our role and our participation in the democratic process, and not being heard or truly not having our recommendations and concerns, human rights concerns for the unhoused community validated through that policy decision, is something that I really would like to emphasize. And then looking at a couple of potential directions that we could make recommendations in the future. So that's kind of where I would like us to produce a statement and put it forth to the commission to put forward. And then share that with our city council members to describe what that process looked like and what some of the potential implications are going to be. So if that's something that's interesting, y'all, Heather, I'll see your hand, and then let's talk a little bit about what that process might look like. So Heather, I'll see your hand.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Blake, I just wanted to highlight that there will be a change in the makeup of City Council with Kaczynski replacing Councillor Semple in Ward 1. And Councillor Semple has had a lot of pressure, at least from my neighborhood association, to enforce anti-homeless laws. And so I'm optimistic that that change in composition will be favorable to human rights.
Yeah, I appreciate that context. And I think us looking at that transition and leadership and making sure that we're having that conversation early on in the process to legitimize the work of our body, and to really make sure that council understands our working group and our commission as an advisory body, and that these recommendations and statements that we produce matter and they need to be taken seriously. We wouldn't be here having these conversations if we weren't talking about human rights issues in the community and the impacts that we know they have on folks in our communities. So I appreciate that note, Heather, and I think that this is a really good opportunity to share our perspective. So I think next steps with this is to look at the content from this evening. I know Jackie and Cynthia and Thomas, a lot of us have shared information, and Jackie and Cynthia have expressed some interest in contributing to a statement that can go forward to the Human Rights Commission, and us getting that in the meeting packet for that. So I'm going to take notes from tonight's conversation and probably draw research and narrative from your presentation, Heather, for us to put something forth and share our thoughts collectively. So I appreciate everyone contributing to the conversation and all the ideas that circulated. So we'll make sure that's reflected in that statement, and is something that our group can put information forward about our conversation. So does that sound good with everyone? Are we comfortable with moving forward with that and making sure that this ends up on the commission's docket here in a couple of weeks?
Works for me.
Absolutely.
Great.
Good for me.
Okay. Wonderful. So we will we'll put something together and we'll reflect the conversation. So I really appreciate everyone contributing to this dialogue. And Heather, I really appreciate you being here. So thanks for being present this evening. We've got one more agenda item before we close out the meeting. And then we should be done here within the next 10 to 15 minutes. That's comfortable with y'all. And Heather, you're welcome anytime. I appreciate the depth of knowledge and information that you bring. It was really nice having you back in the space.
Thank you, everybody. I'm going to split for this time, but I'll look forward to continuing the conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, y'all. So the last piece that we have on our agenda is, well, there are two pieces, but one can be a really quick update and the other piece is a little bit more substantive. So I wanted to provide a brief update on the statement and lethal weather statement, and talk about directions that I'd like to take that conversation. Since that piece about lethal weather was something that was approved by the commission, that we currently have not seen a work session on at City Council. I would like to revisit that topic with the Human Rights Commission so that we can talk about potential challenges and lethal weather hazards associated with the summer months to come, and some of the challenges and public health needs associated with heat and smoke, and really talk about how important it is to revisit that policy. So this is something that I plan on having a conversation with the Human Rights Commission at our next meeting, and just reiterating and emphasizing that the Human Rights Commission would like to request a work session in regards to the letter that we put together. So I just wanted to make sure that you all were comfortable with that, and that you were aware of that, what's happening at that I plan on having happen at the Human Rights Commission meeting in the upcoming weeks. So does anyone have any ideas or input that you would like to go into that dialogue as we bring that to the broader commission and revisit that statement or recommendation? Richard, I see a hand.
Yeah, I don't know if this is gonna make a difference or if it doesn't, but even without the new stadium at the fairgrounds may be revised in a lot of ways, and therefore there's no respite emergency shelter of any kind possibly in the near future. So what are we going to do? I yield.
Yeah, I know that they've done smoke respite at the fairgrounds before, but I think that that's something that was a program conducted by the county. So this is something that we could do some outreach and prospecting about what's the plan for smoke respite and for the use of that land. But yeah, I can certainly bring that into our inquiry and just general questions. It's great, Richard.
Well, just to add on to that, there is no emergency shelter here whatsoever. There's no fallout shelter from a nuclear attack. There's nothing about, no place to go for an earthquake. There's no place to go, period. So as far as all this, I just don't know.
Yeah. So that I think will intersect with a couple departments, but I can send in some information so we can ask some questions about. I think those programmatic components could really complement the recommendation we put forward, both for the winter and summer months. Cynthia?
I think that we were considering asking staff whether our weather proposal had actually been heard at council. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes, we need some explicit guidance on what council meeting packet that was included in, and if it was.
Okay, so that's part of our approach.
Yep, I have that noted. And thanks for bringing that. So what Cynthia is indexing is just that we make sure that we know what meeting packet that was put into. If it was, get confirmation on that. And then I think a more formal request about having a work session regarding it is probably going to be our manner. Although only councilors can propose work sessions, we can make a recommendation on behalf of the commission that council propose a work session, which I think is the only way that this is going to get traction and conversation at that level. So I will keep you up to date, and I just wanted to let you know that that's happening. The last piece on our agenda for this evening is just touching base on work plan items for next year. So in the email, it was sent out to have you all complete information about our current work plan. And your opinions or ideas on what items we've actuated on and what items we need more attention to. So I'm just going to share this real quick so you can take a look at it. But this is just a basic assessment on our work plan item status review. So all of us are participated in different areas on different work plan items. And so this is a survey that I would like each of you to complete, so that we can see what your attitudes on not started, active, and achieved are for each of these work plan items. So if you have engaged or feel that you've made meaningful engagement on any of these work plan items, just select active. If you feel that we've achieved the work plan item, click achieved. And then if you think that we should sustain a work plan item for our fiscal year 24 through 26, select yes. If you don't think we should, select no. And if you are kind of neutral, just select neutral. The goal being that we can prioritize for the upcoming work plan. And I wanted you all to be a part of that process. So anything that you can do to provide your input and feedback about how we've done as a work group over the past 2 years to address some of these items will inform what we should sustain in the upcoming work plan proposal. A major component of that being is there's a lot of ruling items on this work plan. A lot of our advisory and liaison items are more that of a monitor, where we're monitoring and reacting to policy recommendations or programmatic recommendations that are proposed. So some of these items may be active and ongoing, and we may want to sustain, but if there are items that you feel that we've achieved or items that do not need any ongoing attention, I just like for you all to be able to provide that input. And then over the summer months, after the advocacy work group has reviewed these items, and we've talked a little bit about how we feel about our status on each of these, we as a commission will come together and review proposed work plan items. And there is a call for work plan items that will be emailed to each of you. So that's a form collected by the city of Eugene whenever the work plan is being formulated from work group members and commissioners. So you'll be engaged in that process in the summer months as we plan for that retreat. So I just wanted to put that on your radar. Your first point of input is just completing the survey, which was sent out to work group members in preparation for this meeting. So if you can't find that link, just shoot me a message. I'll make sure that you get that link. But I'd like for each of you to provide that input so that we can get a really good assessment on where you think we're at as a work group, and we can put a good plan forward for the next 2 years. So that's all I have on that. Does anyone have any questions there? Does that make sense? Oh, was that clear? Makes that much sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. It's just that more immediate needs need to be addressed as well, including bathroom access and other things like that. Just more immediate needs that the unhoused don't have, and for the housed people too that are going downtown. It's just time that there's bathroom access. There used to be a storage pod by the library, and that was before the pandemic. That needs to come back. There's other things that just more immediate needs need to be addressed as well.
Yeah, thank you. And I think looking at this, make sure that the work plan items currently have the scope for us to address those pieces. And then if we don't write down that idea of what work plan item could go in, so if there's we want something explicitly about making recommendations regarding public utilities or the use of facilities and parks and open space, those might be more specific work plan items that give us more jurisdictional authority within those spaces. So if you're thinking about those things and you have ideas, note them so that this summer, as we're going through that work planning process with the Human Rights Commission, that we can include those elements. So totally recognize the need for kind of some growth in that area. So, okay, if you all can complete that survey, I'd like to discuss it at our advocacy work group meeting next Wednesday. So if you can get that done by the end of the week, that means I can process that feedback over the weekend and provide some substance to our advocacy work group. So that is all I have on the agenda for this evening. Our last component of this evening will be public comment. If anyone who's in attendance has any comment, there's up to a 2 to 3 minute window for you to provide comment, ask any questions, and then we can provide brief feedback to any public comment following that, and then we'll call it a night. So does anyone have anything else they'd like to add before we open the floor to public comment?
None here.
Okay. So Owen, John Q, if you're interested in public comment or providing anything, just put something in the Q&A or the chat and I can promote you to panelists. If you're able to raise your hand, that's actually the easiest. And I'll promote you to panelists so you can speak. Give you about 10 seconds to do so. Okay. If you have any follow-up questions, John Q, I know you know how to get a hold of us. Owen, I saw you were pretty active in the chat with a few questions earlier. If you have any more questions about the work of our work group or the commission more broadly, just shoot us an email, humanrights@eugene, and we will be in touch. So thank you all for being here tonight. Anyone have any closing remarks before we call it an evening?
Thank you for doing such a great job leading the meeting.
I appreciate you.
Ditto.
My pleasure. Okay, y'all. Well, you're the rock stars that make these meetings great. So thanks for being here. I'll be following up with you individually if there's any individual needs. I know a couple of us are collaborating on projects and items such as that. And John, I see your note in the chat. Looking at those recordings, if you reach out to me directly, I can connect you with the city staff that'll be able to get those recordings for you.
Thank you, Owen, for your chat as well. Y'all have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Owen. Okay. Take care, y'all. Thank you. Appreciate you.
Happy trails.